Good morning. Welcome to the inaugural State of the Library event. It is so great to see so many people here in the room. Please help yourselves and enjoy the coffee and the donuts. For those of you who I haven't met yet, I am Katy Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of the Denver Public Library Friends Foundation. Oh, yeah. I love it. I love that good morning energy. Hi, Jacqueline. As many of you know, the Friends Foundation raises funds and builds community support to help the Denver Public Library do what it does best, which is connect people with ideas, resources, information, and to each other. I want to give a few shout outs to people in the room. I want to start with the Friends Foundation team. Can my staff please raise their hands? Okay. We have an incredible team at the Friends Foundation, and as we are celebrating gratitude this month, I want to say a special thank you to my staff. I also want to give a shout out to the Denver Public Library Friends Foundation board. Can board members in the room please raise your hands? Thank you, board, for all you do. And then last but certainly not least, I want to give a thank you to the library people who are in the room today. I've got our library leader sitting next to me, but wonderful library staff who do this work every day and help support the community. Can you raise your hands, library staff, please? Thank you so much for all you do. And also supporting the library is the commission. And I know we have a number of library commissioners in the room. I want to give them a thank you as well. Can you please raise your hands? This event is really intended to bring together and thank and inform library supporters, members, and advocates. It's so wonderful to see so many faces in the room. Some of them are brand new, and some come to every single Friends Foundation event. So it's great to get you all together in this room this morning. And whether this is your first event with the Friends Foundation or you've been coming to events for 30 years, you're our friend. And this event is really part of a larger series that the Friends Foundation is kicking off this November. Friendsgiving. This month is really dedicated to gratitude. Thanking our friends and supporters is so important because we want you to know that you have an incredible impact on the library, the foundation, and the community. Your support keeps Denver Library strong, welcoming, and free for everyone. So thank you so much for all you do. So today we have our 11th city librarian with us, Nicolle Davies. So grateful to have her here in the room with us as she's just a few months into her new role. We will get to discuss with her how libraries have evolved, how they serve the community in all sorts of different ways, current opportunities, challenges, and look at what's ahead for the Denver Public Library. And I can't think of anyone better to help us have this conversation than our new city librarian, Nicolle Davies. Can everyone give her a warm welcome? I'm going to read her bio for those of you who haven't and to get to know her a little bit more. A nationally recognized library leader, Nicolle previously served as Colorado's state librarian and executive director of Arapahoe Libraries, where she was named Library Journal's 2016 Librarian of the Year. Passionate about ensuring access to information and opportunity for all, She brings a forward-thinking vision to how libraries can inspire learning, connection, and belonging across Denver. Please join me in welcoming Nicolle. Oh, that was a double clap. Hey, you know what? She's new. She's a few months in. I think she deserves a double clap. It's 9 in the morning. Come on. Nicolle, thanks for joining us this morning. And thank you to all of you who submitted some wonderful questions ahead of time. We gave all of the attendees the opportunity to submit questions. And not surprising, with a very curious crowd, because we know library lovers are curious people, you all had some very thoughtful, hard questions that you submitted. So thank you for that. We've integrated those questions into the program today. So let's start with an easy one, Nicolle. You're a couple months into the role. Can you tell us what it's been like stepping into this new role as city librarian, and what has inspired you so far?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here with you, and thank you for coming out early. Thank you for spending time with us. I do have to also, a little closer, that's what I'm getting the cue down here. I do have to give a shout out to our facilities team, and Daniel in particular, who built this marvelous non-heat producing fireplace that I convinced our director of ops to let me buy, because we didn't own one before, but I was like, we will use this for programming, so my library staff here, let your minds go wild, we can use this for programming. It now lives here at Central. Yeah, I know, right? Isn't it so pretty? It's so pretty. It has a mantle and everything. Anyway, so I am thrilled to be here with you this morning. Katy shared a little bit about my background, but I grew up in Littleton, Colorado, and lived in Denver in my 20s. I joke about the branches that I studied out when I was in grad school the first time. I lived in what we affectionately call the Denver dorms off of Spear, which is where a bunch of 20-somethings would move after you graduated from CU Boulder. So these became my local libraries, and really sweetly, there is this little pewter book stack over here that commemorates. This was given out on the day that this branch opened in 1995. It was March 17th, and in a crazy small world connection, my dad worked for 3M Corporation for 33 years, and 3M was a vendor that helped to build this building. Like back in the day, 3M would, they're the Post-it notes, but they also did library security gates and other things. So my parents actually went to the grand opening of this branch on March 17, 1995, and I have my very own version of that little pewter book stack because my dad got it as a memento. I was in college, and I literally held on to that thing for 30 plus years, and now I am here. So it is magical in that this truly is a dream job for me. I've been in libraries for over 2 decades now, and Denver Public was always in my head the diamond in the crown, right? It's the grand dame of library systems in Colorado, and being a Colorado kid, this was kind of the pinnacle of jobs. And I've had some amazing journeys to get here, and I am so thrilled to be here in this big, beautiful system with lots of complexity and amazing staff, and just doing such important work every day. And so I continue to be inspired, and I feel like everybody who is in this profession should feel like this. It is such a privilege to do this work. It is hard work. It's such important work, especially in this day and age where we're polarized and information is hard to come by. And so to know that you can go to this beautiful free resource, that your tax dollars are at work, and get accurate information so you can formulate your own thoughts. And with trusted information professionals connecting you with that content is phenomenal. And I've always said, and I will always believe this, you can't truly have a democratic society without free press and public libraries. And so the fact, my very first job, actually, my first career was in journalism. So it is this amazing culmination of my passions. But journalism led me to libraries, and I feel like without those two things, you really cannot be a practicing democratic society. So to feel like we are on the front lines of helping people get access to get their questions met, their needs met, literally we get to change lives. And so that's the work we do every day. Who gets to say that? I mean, it's extraordinary. extraordinary. And so I'm inspired first and foremost every day by our staff, because they're on the front lines doing this work, and continuing to respond to all of the challenges that we face. And I want to thank all of you for being our friends, truly. We can't do this work without your support. You're our friends and you're our ambassadors, and there's so much power in that. So I'm inspired every day, and I work in this beautiful building, and then I go to our beautiful branches, and we'll talk more about those because some of them are being renovated, and thank you for the bond, and so we can talk more about that, but there's just so much to be inspired by, and I feel like the work we do is so critically important, even more so than ever.
Thanks, Nicolle. So when we talk to our library supporters, a lot of you in this room, we tend to start conversations with, what's your library story? I think that's such a powerful way to kick off a conversation because everybody has a library story, and oftentimes that goes back to childhood. It's something that is tucked away in our heart, and we get to hear these wonderful stories from all of you and from people that work at the library, and I think that's such a wonderful thing that we can all share in this room. So I thought to get to know Nicolle a little more, she shared a little bit about, you know, different libraries she's been to in Denver and her parents coming to the opening in 1995, but would love to hear maybe if there's a little Nicolle story that you want to share, or what you think of as your kind of library story, maybe your first memory.
So my parents are first generation Americans, and I was born on the East Coast, but my dad got transferred with 3M to Colorado when I was 6. So when we came here in New Jersey, where I was born, kindergarten was playtime, and you didn't learn to read until first grade. Well, when we got here, I'd done kindergarten there, we came here, and you learned how to read in kindergarten in Colorado, not first grade, so I was a year behind. So this is gonna sound sad, but it gets better. So I had to go to a room during recess every day called the Reading Ranch. It was sad at the time. It was devastating, right? Like everybody's going to recess, and I'm going to the Reading Ranch.
Were you alone in that room?
I don't remember.
I hope you had friends at the ranch.
It was me and probably a paraprofessional. I don't know. Anyway, I'm thankful to Mrs. Aspergren, my first grade teacher, for recognizing I couldn't read and getting me the resources I need. All that to say, so I was a little behind on getting to the library. So when I finally got to Bemis Public Library, I remember, and this is like, Phil might be the only one, Phil, you guys know me, okay. Some of my friends from the south side of town might remember this, but the Bemis Public Library used to have an old wagon, like yeah, you know, yeah, so, yep, south side, okay. So anyway, so we had like a historic wagon, and you weren't allowed to play in this wagon, but the children's librarian would get on that wagon and do story time. And it was marvelous. So anyway, so now I'm reading and I'm taking all these books, and it was amazing. So that was my foray in, was to Davies. Now let me fast forward again, like literally probably 15 years, no longer than that, way longer than that, probably 15 years ago now. I'm at a conference, American Library Association conference. You know where I'm going, don't you? And I'm with my mentor, and we meet in the hallway, that children's librarian. What? You think I fangirled? Oh, I fangirled. She had no idea who I was, but I was like, you're my librarian at Davies. Anyway, it was magical. So it all came, it was probably 20 years ago now, it all came full circle. She's fully retired now. I don't even know what this woman's name was, but I literally fell over her when I found her in a hallway, and she knew my mentor, so we stopped, and I was like, you know, I still thought she was beautiful, and she read so well out loud, and she was amazing. So anyway, that's my sad but happy life.
That's a good library story. I kind of want to go to a reading branch. That sounds nice. If there's horses, or
no, I have a picture in my mind, but
well, thanks, Nicolle, for sharing some personal stories, so we could get to know you a little more.
You might see why I was reluctant to have that question. She was like, should we add your library story? I was like, I don't know if we should.
No, we did the right thing there, so thank you. Okay, so we've got to know Nicolle a little bit. So let's dive into some library questions now. So I know when I started at the Friends Foundation several years ago, I just really marveled at and loved learning about all that the library does. I was shocked. I had no idea all the wonderful programs and services that the library offers. I had borrowed books. And so I think the way that libraries serve the community is exceptional and just continues to grow and evolve and adapt. So I'd love to hear from you, Nicolle. How have public libraries evolved over the past couple decades? What do you see at kind of the forefront of that?
I love this question because people always, I remember when I left journalism and PR, I literally had somebody, one of my clients, call me and say, like, what are you doing going to work for the library? Like, it's a dinosaur. Is it even going to be there? And I was like, I just don't agree with you. And so when I think about those statements of, and I think that's a definitely antiquated, out of date statement, but I think about, back in the day, we were repositories of knowledge. We were a little bit more buttoned up. We had a certain way that we did what we did, and we only did a few things. And I think this profession, I'm so proud of this profession, but we have been so agile over the last several decades, and we are constantly responsive to the changes in the community. So you can think back. I remember again, like the internet came out. Well, why do you need libraries anymore? Well, clearly we weathered that storm, right? E-books are happening. What are you going to check out anymore? Again, we're still crushing it with our numbers. Because we continue to evolve and change, and we are so in step with our communities and being responsive to the needs of the community that we watch what is happening and we respond as needed. So, we have expanded programming, we have expanded services, we have expanded our collections. We are a dynamic, organic, breathing institution, and I think, again, I'm so proud of that because we are constantly, I always think about it as a dance, like, are we leading or are we following? We're so in lockstep with our community that, we're watching them and we're responding, and it's just this beautiful collaboration. So, the evolution is definitely where, we were about the knowledge of, the storage of knowledge and providing access to that. And now, I think our focus has definitely been more around meeting needs and what do those needs look like, whether that's changing in programming. One of the things I'm super proud of, I feel like we've always done for the last several decades, 0 to 5, the best. I think nobody does getting kids ready for school and ready to read. Where were you when I was growing up? Better than the public library, right? Like, nobody gets a kid ready better than the public library. And so that's that space we have dominated, I think, for a very long time. And then we started to adapt and add more for our teen services. It's a really tricky demographic, right? That's where they're trying to figure out who they are. Do they want to be here anymore? What does that programming look like? How do you make the library super cool? And one of the things I'm really proud of here at Denver, at DPL, is that we're expanding our adult programming. Because there's a life cycle in your library use. So you use it a lot, and then you get away from it in your 20s and 30s, and then you might come back to it if you have a family, you're a caregiver, you have children, and then it might bring you back to the library. And then you might lose touch again as your kids grow. There are some gaps in our programming, and Denver Public has said, we see those gaps, and we're going to start serving adults in really creative ways, so through programming. And that's just an example of, again, watching what is the need in the community, and the success with, for example, One Book, One Denver, we brought that back after 10 years of that being dormant, and the response was phenomenal. It was over a month's worth of programming. We had hundreds of people gather in this room to hear the author speak, and one of the things I heard anecdotally from patrons and folks sitting around me was just this desire to be back in community with one another and come back to a place and have a shared something that doesn't have to do with religion or politics or whatever. It was just this shared space and this shared experience, and we get to do that. We get to do that in these buildings. And so I feel like that, and I think That's a response to the pandemic and people feeling isolated and the polarization of our society. People want to come back to spaces where all that's off the table and you can just have commonality. We both read this book. How cool is that? And I'll share this story. I'm sorry if some of you have heard this, but this was magic. We had 2 library patrons with their book, okay, with their one book, When Denver Read, who ran into each other at Red Rocks. Both of them carrying their books. I can't even make this up, right? They're both carrying their books. They see each other at Red Rocks. They don't know each other. They introduce one another. They meet. They're like, oh, I'm reading. They take a picture and they send it to us. They send it to us and we put it on Instagram because how amazing, 2 strangers who happen to run into each other at Denver Public all of a sudden forged a bond over a shared book that and God bless you're reading at Red Rocks. I would trip and break my neck, but I don't know, I guess you walk up, find a good spot, read, and then walk back. I don't know, but I will say that is the power of the public library, right? That is the power to bring people together. And Jen Hoffman, one of our library directors, who's amazing, was saying, we were doing an interview last week, and she said, this is one of the few places you can be together but be alone. And I thought about that too, when we think about the isolation of COVID and working from home and all these other things, sometimes you want to be in community but you don't want to be with people, you don't have capacity to talk, but you don't want to feel alone. There's very few places you can do that don't require you buying something. And we have that space, in 27, almost 28 locations around this community, around the city. And so there's so much there. So anyway.
Love that. That makes me want to carry around my library book so that I can start up a conversation. It's just a nice meet cute for a friendship. I love that story. Thank you, Nicolle. So we received a lot of great questions from this crowd about renovations. There's a lot going on there are 27 branches across the system. So I imagine taking care of those assets requires that at any given time, there's going to be a branch shut down for renovation because they're heavily used buildings. Can you please share information about the renovations occurring? We got some questions specifically before Tuesday, the biggest, most recent bond package, the 2017 Elevate bond package. Can you speak to the status of those renovations?
Yeah, and I'm definitely going to refer to my notes here just so I don't misspeak on anything. So, and so we'll come around to anyway. So we're going to start with AFMAR, which was completed and reopened to the community on July 10th, and that is such a fun branch. If you haven't been there yet, it used to be a church. There's so many interesting things going on, and it is now stunning. And there's beautiful natural light, and that is lovely. So that is open. Phyllis Big Pond, I got to go and tour that a couple of weeks ago. That construction is in progress, and these are all anticipated completion dates, so you know how that can be. Spring of 2026. Ross Broadway, you'll see depending on how you got here, the fencing is around there now. That branch has come offline, and we are expecting construction to start in December, and then with an anticipated construction completion date sometime in the second quarter of 2027, so we would come back online in the third quarter of 2027. And I should mention that when we take a library offline, it closes, and then we have to do what's called decommissioning the library, which gets all of our assets out of the library, all of our books, computers, artwork, all of that. It takes a while to decommission a building, just like it takes a little while to get the building reset back up. So the construction's hopefully done at the end of Q2. We should open in Q3 after we get everything back in. Polly and Robinson completed and reopened in February of this year. Schlesman, I know this is a much loved branch. Phase 1 of the construction is substantially complete. And phase 2, which is restrooms, which is critically important, that is underway, and we all know that. And that's the worst, right? When you don't have enough money to do a full renovation and you have beautiful parts of the building, and then you walk into the last thing you want to be antiquated is the bathroom. Trust me on this. And then they'll move into HVAC in the fall of 2026. So it's not anticipated to open until Q1 of 27. Eugene Field, The design is 80% complete and construction is slated for Q3 of 2026 with anticipated construction completion in Q2 of 2027, reopening in Q3 of 2027. And then University Hills is very similar to Eugene Field. Design is at 80% complete, construction slated for the third quarter of next year with moving in hopefully in the third quarter of 2027. Sorry, I said that wrong. So construction is slated to start in Q3 of 2026, construction completion in Q2 of 27, and then reopening in Q3 of 2027. So there's a lot going on in those bonds.
But exciting for what I went to the AFMAR reopening, and it's really incredible to go to these reopenings and you get to see, I'm Pauline Robinson, which got a community room added onto it. You get to see these incredible transformations that happen inside these buildings. I know it is difficult to wait and to not be able to use them, but the magic that happens during those renovations just makes these spaces so much more accessible and optimal for community use.
Katy, if I could add to that, best practice in libraries, if all things were equal and funding was what it should be for every library, the idea is that you would touch a library every 10 years. So that's separate from like just maintenance, right? There's things like HVAC, all that stuff's gonna go out, but in theory, like a best practice is that you're refreshing a building every 10 years. When you think about the sheer volume of people coming in and out of a branch, the bathrooms, the carpet, the paint, the wear and tear of a building, when you think about that asset should be touched every 10 years. That's a gold standard. I'm not saying that, but so when we think about that, we think again about the pain of like, but it's my branch and it's coming offline for 2 years. It's a responsibility I feel like we have as these are assets that are owned and we need to maintain them. So that helps a little bit and it doesn't change the pain. When it's your branch, you're super sad it's closed.
Thank you, that's great. And as part of that, we got a great question. I know I see Bob in the room who's done construction on some of these branches during the renovations. So as part of the process of getting all of the vendors to help with these renovations, how does the library select architects, engineers, and construction companies to help complete the major renovations?
So we're a special unicorn in the city of Denver. We are part of the city and county of Denver, and yet we're an independent agency. So what that translates to is all of you, hopefully, voted yes on a bond to give us a funding stream called the DPL fund in 2022, which is amazing, and that gives us about 1/3 of our funding. The other 2/3 comes from the city and county of Denver. I say all of this because these assets, these beautiful buildings we're sitting in, are owned by the city and county of Denver. And so we have to work hand in glove with the city on all of these processes. So we're not, there's 2 ways to be a library in Colorado. You can be a library district where you're a standalone taxing entity, where if you were to look at your property taxes, just like it says Denver Public Schools and then there's a chunk of money, it would say Arapahoe Libraries and there would be a chunk of money. The other way is to be a municipal library where you're part of a city or a county. Where I say we're a unicorn is that we're not only a municipal library, but we also have this other independent funding stream. So we're not quite a district and we're not fully municipal. We're somewhere in between. And to that end, the city does still own these buildings. So contractors and design teams are pre-qualified and solicited by Davies, which is the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, which is an agency within the city of Denver. And that interagency team then solicits and procures bid proposals, either via on-call contractors or requests for proposal services. And we are super fortunate here at DPL in that we have within our facilities area, we have some architects on our team who work and interface with Davies architects and engineers. So I feel like we're really lucky to have that. Not every library that is in a municipal setup has that. So we have our own staff who can help to translate the needs of a library, which is a different building project than say a water sanitation center. They can help to translate the needs of the library in the same language that other architects and engineers speak. So I feel like we're really fortunate to have that.
Thank you, Nicolle. I'm learning so much up here. I love this. We received a great question about funding and the budget of the library. I think this is a question that at the foundation we get a lot. Just in the pie, where do the different slices come from to fund the library? So we'd love to hear from you about how the library is funded, and then kind of a question to add on to that is specifically around federal funding. With federal funding cuts, how could that affect Denver Public Library, or does it affect the library?
Sure, that's a great question. So as I mentioned, we have the DPL fund, which is amazing and lovely, and we get to retain those dollars, which is great. And then we also have general fund dollars, and so those come to us from the city and county, and when if we don't expend all of our general fund dollars, those go back to the city at the end of the year. Whereas with the DPL fund, we get to retain those dollars. So that is, it's lovely, lovely, lovely that we have that fund. I can't underscore that enough. It is great. Fortunately, we are not federally funded, so we may have, as an organization, had grants from federal grants in the past. There's a myriad of reasons why we could have had federal grants, but we don't use that for our primary funding, and so I think so breathe a sigh of relief there. Now, if I can step back to the 20,000-foot view of federal funding and libraries and put my state library hat back on for a moment. Colorado, so there is the Institute for Museum and Library Services, IMLS, is at the federal level, and they do that work for libraries and museums. Within IMLS, they distribute funding called LSTA, Library Services Technology Act. That's a formula-based grant, and it's based on the size of your population. So Colorado takes in about $3.2 million from the feds to the Colorado State Library. That money pays for 66% of their staff. What do their staff do? Their staff support small and rural libraries across the state. So Denver Public is amazing and the largest. 75% of our libraries in Colorado are small and rural, meaning that there's maybe one branch, maybe that branch is open, at a minimum it has to be open 20 hours a week to be a public library, but that's 75% of our libraries in Colorado. So you can imagine that there's not a lot of capacity to do professional development. There's not a lot of capacity to get help writing your policies. You may have questions about collection development. You may not have a trained librarian on staff. So the state library really supports a lot of that work. They also help with our prison libraries. They hold the talking book collection for the state. They hold the Braille collection. Braille is very expensive to have and maintain, so they support the whole state, all 64 counties. So they do really important work, and they get that funding through LSTA in IMLS. So just to further complicate all of this, and the alphabet soup I'm giving you right now, the Institute for Museum and Library Services has been line itemed out in the current federal budget. Now this has happened before, and typically the Senate will serve as a backstop and get the funding back in. I don't know what will happen this time, and we're in light of a federal shutdown, so there's not a lot going on about the budget right now. So that's just something to be aware of. And then in addition to all of that, just to make 2025 even harder, the Museum and Library Services Act, which is the act that creates the agency that creates the funding, that expired on September 30th. The MLSA needs reauthorization. So it is really, really difficult for libraries across the country right now, especially if you have ties to federal funding to do the work that you're doing. And we know how critically important libraries are in our community. They're critically important in every community. And so just so you're all aware of just how that all works and flows, if that's something you want to keep your eye on, but that's work that's happening at the federal level with a lot of partners to make sure that that funding gets restored, and hopefully you can be an agency and not be authorized, which I know is hard to understand, but they could get the funding restored even if the Museum and Library Services Act doesn't get reauthorized. And I don't begin to understand how that works, but we've seen it with other agencies. So they could be okay if they get the funding restored. It's just, it becomes a big unknown. So if you feel passionately about that, I'm not telling you to do advocacy, but you could reach out to your US senators because they would be the ones working on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That was a complex answer.
Yeah,
I know.
and if you ever want to talk offline, I clearly can geek out on this, so we can spend more time on this some other time.
Just corner Nicolle a cup of coffee after this, and you can ask for more. Thank you. We received a great question about how the library supports health, and I think of health in all sorts of ways. There's mental health and a warm place to stay, and how the library really does so much of that work just day to day. So can you speak to your thoughts on specifically how Denver Public Library responds to public health needs in general from the Denver community?
I do think space matters a lot, and I do think the way you feel in a space matters. So I love that with these renovations, and really I think even in all of our branches, even if they're not up for renovation, just feeling welcomed and warm and respected in a space matters so much, and I think we do that. I think our libraries are really beautifully maintained. So I do think space matters, and I think it matters not just physically, but I think it when you feel welcomed into a space and you feel that you can be there and you're represented and treated with respect, I do think that impacts your mental outlook. And so I feel like we do a really lovely job with that. I also know that it gets often when society happens, life happens, it happens to people, and then those people show up at our doors and we have to respond. So if our partners around the community, we partner with so many different organizations to do the work that we do, because the needs are not just information needs any longer, right? People show up and they need all sorts of things. We often partner because we know, just being aware of scope creep, we can't do everything. Although my staff is probably smart enough to do everything, we shouldn't do everything. And there are times where we have to recognize this is maybe outside of our scope or outside of our lane, and so we should partner with a professional who can help people connect to those resources. I also just know that as those partners around the community lose funding or their funding is compromised, it just brings more challenge to us. So that's a reality that we're sitting in. I think we've been really responsive at this branch in particular with serving some of our unhoused patrons and connecting them to lots of amazing resources and doing that in a respectful way. And I think that we do that in a myriad of different ways, whether that's immigrant and refugee communities, whether that's English language services. I think there's just all of those ways that we, again, see what's going on in the community and try and respond. And I don't want to underestimate the value of, just from a mental health standpoint, some of the programming and just consumption for recreation, right? Just literally being able to escape the reality of the complexity of our lives right now, and being able to escape in a book or an audiobook or a program. There's a huge amount of value in that. So I think we show up in a lot of different ways and for many different customers, and I think that's part of what's so special about the work we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. There's been a lot of news coverage, obviously, about book ban challenges across the country and censorship, so I think that's important to touch on in this moment. Why are censorship and book bans in libraries so detrimental to intellectual freedom, and has the Denver Public Library been affected by this movement?
Yeah, that's a heavy one. So there is a belief, and I share this belief, that a good public library should have something to offend everyone. The beauty, yeah, you can laugh, I feel that way. You can say that too. The beauty of what we do is that truly we have something for everyone. And so the idea is that I shouldn't be deciding what you're consuming, and you shouldn't be deciding what I'm consuming. And there's a Latin phrase in librarianship that is, we are not in loco parentis. We are not here to parent. Schools get to do that. That's their charge. You turn over these beautiful children to them for the day, and they're in charge of your child. We don't have that same charge. And so the idea is that this is a place of curiosity, exploration. You should be able to find what you're looking for. We should be able to connect you to that resource. And then you should go on your journey. Like, you should go down the rabbit holes you're curious about. But we are not in a position to tell you which rabbit holes are acceptable. That is just not, again, this kind of goes back to a democratic purview of free press and public libraries. You go and explore. We trust that you're smart enough to consume what you like to consume. And the idea is that if you are traveling to the library with a younger patron, then you're there to help guide that patron. But we're not in that role to guide that patron. And so I feel like, you know, I know that many of our libraries around the state have faced this, we've seen this, but this is not a new ideal of libraries. This is in the fabric of what we have done always and we will always do. So this isn't like a new trend for us to stand up for that belief of intellectual freedom. It is core to what we do in our profession. It is something that when you go to library school, it is paramount in those foundational classes. So this isn't a new concept, and this is something that we will continue to maintain and uphold because it's what it means to be a public library, is to provide access to all without judgment to what that is.
That's great. Thanks, Nicolle. So I know there's a lot of Libby lovers in this room. I meet Libby lovers all over town. People love their ebooks at the Denver Public Library. So, and I learned so much about physical collections versus digital collections. It's fascinating. So can you share with the group, why are ebooks so darn expensive?
Yeah, okay, so I'm definitely gonna, and our staff is so smart. If you wanna talk to Stacey Watson, like she's amazing. And I will just kind of give you the high level, and I can't. So the reality is, and again, libraries have always partnered, you know, like, we love authors, we love publishers. I mean, that's how we get the content for our customers. So it's not as though we don't want to pay. We do. We want to work with our vendors and provide access and content to our customers that they're interested in. However, libraries can pay 3 to 5 times more on consumer pricing. And let me try and explain that. So the average price of a library ebook is about $65, and an e-audio book, which I'm a huge listener, is over $100. So you're sitting there saying, like, why, if I look on Amazon or on my Kindle or what have you? Juxtapose that to the idea is, the reality is for a hardcover book here at DPL, we'll spend about $15 or less. So we're talking about $65, $100, $15. So why is that? So when a library purchases an ebook, we're purchasing a license to that book, and we're only buying 1 copy per license. So again, think about, you know, everybody, the latest fill in the blank, and you're dying to get it. We need to buy dozens of copies of whatever that new book is. Most ebooks expire, so, and that can be based either on 26 checkouts or like roughly 1 to 2 years. So we have to continue, depending on the demand of something, we will have to buy it several times. I know, it's not ideal. And so this has been just a battle I think we've had with publishers for a very, very, very long time. I feel like we've been talking about that. I'm looking at like some of the staff. I mean, I feel like 15 plus years we've been having this conversation, maybe longer, I don't know. Yeah, it is less than ideal. And again, it's not that public libraries don't want to pay to consume, it's just, I don't know that we've arrived at the best way. I wish the publishers would work more closely with us on what does the best purchasing model look like so we can lend. And I understand, like, it's a different environment, right? Like if you buy an ebook, you're probably going to be the only one who reads it. And or maybe you would share it with maybe one other person. But the idea, so I understand, they're saying, you know, you're going to buy it and then you're going to check it out all these times. So I understand maybe having to pay more, but this just continues to be a battle across the country with the pricing for e-content, and we know how popular e-content is. I mean, so I think that continues to be a work in progress, but understanding that really straps the budget of how much you can buy and how often you can buy it when if we're looking at consumption of materials and ebooks and e-audio are the ones that are trending, we're limited, you know, so it adds into that whole equation. So the one thing I would tell you as being a great library user is that when you're done with your ebook or your e-audio, return it early. That helps so much. I know it sounds silly. And then also, if you're not ready to consume something, put a tag on it and come back to it as opposed to just keeping it and holding it in a queue, because that means somebody else can't use it. So those would be the 2 things I would say as a lovely patron and library user to help other library users. That's one way to help with that. It's a small thing, but it adds up. Yep.
Good tip for the crowd, thank you. What do you see as the most vital part of the relationship between the Denver Public Library and the Friends Foundation?
So can somebody please notice how cute this is? They positioned me for the Denver Public Library side, and she's on the front. It's the same one. How thoughtful. Anyway, first of all, I'm so excited that we have such a robust Friends group. Not only, look, you guys are our partners in so much that we do, and I love the whole board, and I love working with all of you. We can't do everything we want to do with the funding we have, and so a great example of that is these bonds, which are amazing, don't typically cover the entire cost of a project. Let me try and understand that. Give me some time. Give me 6 more months to maybe try and wrap my head around why.
We'll ask this question again next year.
I keep telling Katy this may be the only state of the library trust. But so I'm still, if that's not what we need, why are we not asking for more? But I've yet to, I don't have those answers yet. But so that's a perfect place of, we want to, if we're gonna touch a building, we wanna make sure it includes the bathrooms. I know that sounds silly, but some of these things that I've come across, we have the money to do it, but not the bathrooms. So the friends step in and they help us find a grant, or they talk to a donor who has passion around that branch, or that sounds like a small thing, but just knowing that we have this entire group of friends, and I'm using the term friends, but truly you're ambassadors for us in the community. And so the fact that we have such a robust, active arm of lovers and supporters is tremendous, and it helps us do so much more work than we could do alone, and it helps to raise awareness about the work that we do. And I just feel like we're so incredibly blessed to have such an active, well-established foundation that shares the same passion we have around our work, and is able to, again, raise funds and awareness about the work that we do. So I feel like we're so very fortunate.
Thank you. So let's talk about what's ahead. So on Tuesday, the Vibrant Denver bond passed, which is very exciting. It includes some significant investment in the Denver Public Library and a couple of the packages. So can you speak to what comes next with the bond? What's included on that?
Thank you all for saying yes to the bond again. Thank you so much. And they have historically been and currently are the way that capital supported and renovations are funded, in addition to support and supplement from friends and donors and grants. So, so what did that include? So I'm going to go through these. First, there's improvement to the Bear Valley branch, including HVAC, which I know is not sexy, but you don't want it to be too hot or too cold. A creation of a new idea lab at Green Valley Ranch, renovation of the Blair Caldwell African American Research Library, and some of you may be saying they just had a renovation. They touched the first floor of a 3-story building. Just like this beautiful building, we didn't touch all 7 floors. They're really, really expensive assets. The renovation to the historic Decker branch, renovation to the Montbello branch, building a new library that's co-located with affordable housing on East Colfax. So that, if we're keeping track, friends, that'll get us to 29, which is amazing, after Nina Archuleta, and we'll talk about that in a sec. I will say that you can always follow the progress of the bonds on our website. There's a great dedicated space, again, with our architects and our engineers who update that information, working hand in glove with communications to let you all know what's going on at any given time. And I will also say that it's amazing, and that will mean that there's going to be more branches coming online, and that's hard and challenging. And so I just wanted to say thank you and recognize that this is exciting, and it'll be a next few years of lots of work ahead. So it's amazing that you all just keep saying yes. So thank you.
Yeah, very exciting. Thank you, Denver voters. And last question, Nicolle, again, thinking about the future of the Denver Public Library. What gets you excited about where the library is headed?
I always get excited in engaging with our staff. I do feel like this profession often attracts some of the smartest, kindest people I've ever met, and they are full of creativity. So Our staff is amazing, and I look forward to working with them every day. I look forward to the programming that we're doing. We are opening the Lena Archuleta branch on, which will be our 28th branch, and we soft open to that this 17th, which is a Monday, which means you can go in there and sneak preview. And then on the 22nd, we'll have the grand opening for community. And that is another really creative, so again, here's an example, a really creative branch that's co-located in a community center that's meeting the needs of so many different needs of that community. And I love that when this idea was being formulated, they said a library is critically important to our vision for our future. It's critically important to take care of our kids. It's critically important to help our adults continue to grow and learn. And I love that community sees the value in the public library the way that we see the value in being in community in being in partnership with community. So I'm so excited about that branch. Please go, because that whole facility will blow your mind. It's so beautiful. And I just continue to see the creative ways that our staff show up for customers in this changing landscape of how we meet needs. I don't think, when I look at some of the things like an Idea Lab, where you can go and use a laser cutter and a sewing machine and play around with cost prohibitive software, I don't know that we could have guessed that 20 years ago that libraries would be in that space, and now look at, we're in that space, and we're in that space in several branches. I just think about all the different ways we step up over time to meet the changing needs of the community, and then just the changing reality of the world we're operating in. So I get excited about where we're going, and some of that I don't even know yet. We do have this big, I shouldn't say like, we don't know where we're going. We do. We have this big, beautiful strategic plan. And it outlines our values, and it has our touchstones, and we know where we're headed. It's a 6-year plan, we're 1 year into it. But I know that with every good strategic plan, you want it to be agile, you don't want it to live on a shelf, you want to continue to revisit it. So what are we seeing that we need to pivot within that plan? We know where we're going, we have a North Star, but what we don't have fully fleshed out is how are all the ways we're going to get there. And again, I just think the creativity of the staff and just the overarching commitment to serving the public is what will get us there, and get us there in creative ways.
Thank you so much, Nicolle. Thank you all for all of your thoughtful, inquisitive questions. We really appreciate it. And thanks, Nicolle, for spending the morning with us in the hot seat when you're on week 11. I think she did fantastic. Can we all give Nicolle? Thank you. So as we wrap up, I'd like to reiterate our gratitude. Thank you so much for each and every one of you for your support, your advocacy. It really helps impact programs, services, and spaces in communities across Denver. Before we leave here, I want to do something a little bit fun. I'd like to see which friends have their special library card. Who here in the crowd is a library card holder? Okay, good. That's good. That was a test. That was a trick question. Okay. Well, since we know we have a lot of members in the room, I bet a lot of you know that members get a special edition I'm a Friend library card, this beautiful card here, when they sign up to become a member for the Friends Foundation. Who in the room has that library card on them right now? Who can, oh wow, you all are so fast. I was going to say the first person to hold it up. Okay, wow. I saw so many hands. Okay, you there in the red shirt, I think you were laser focused on that. So come on up, you get a Friends Foundation mug because you are so fast holding up your card. Okay, watch the wires here.
I love that she's carrying it in case you don't believe it.
Oh yeah, keep carrying it because then can we get a picture together? Nicolle, do you want to stand up and be in our,
You're in the middle.
In our picture? Get in the middle, good. Right. You got the mug and your card.
1, 2, 3. So cute. Okay, wonderful.
Give Carol a round of applause for winning that medal. And flew off there. Okay, great. Thank you for that. And then before we go, just wanted to share a special treat. We do have the Red Chair Bookshop open an hour early today. For those of you who haven't had a chance to get into the Red Chair Bookshop since the Central Library reopened, it's across Schlesman Hall. You'll hit the Commons and then go left. And thank you, Andrea, for opening the bookshop early. For our attendees here today, just remember that members get 15% off. So you flash that. Carol's got it right there. You flash that card and you get your discount at the bookshop. And we also hope that you'll come back right here. We'll be in this space in Parkview next weekend for our 3-day used book sale, and all of that benefits the Denver Public Library Friends Foundation. And also another treat we just have lots of treats for you today. We have swag bags with some wonderful goodies that were passed out a year ago this week when the Central Library reopened after the renovation. And so those are wonderful little items commemorating the Central Library reopening, kind of like Nicolle shared that her parents got in 1995. So those are really special. I know those are going to be passed out if you'd like to take that as you leave. Please stay connected, visit your favorite branches, and continue to be part of this incredible library community. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for joining us today.